I'm pretty happy with the weather at the moment. Yes, we've had some spring storms, and hey, for the folks in Dunedin, very sorry, that was a torrential downpour, wasn't it? And particularly for people in South Dunedin. On the flip side, though, all the hydro lakes seem to have filled up pretty quickly, and I'm in that sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone of being not too hot and not too cold. I don't need to plug in my heater or my fan at the moment. In fact, it's almost as warm in my room when I get up in the morning as it is in my bed. It's a nice zone to be in, Phil, but it's not going to last, is it?
You've obviously got a lovely insulated home. I have a 1950s house, which
Oh,
is a
yeah.
little not quite so sure about that. It retains the heat too quickly, and then it lets it out too fast.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
um,
Sorry,
but
sorry
I
for
hear,
gloating there.
yeah, no, it's good though, because it's so funny you mentioned that, because literally last night as I was going to bed, I thought, why am I still using my heat pump? Because it's that time of year where normally I'm not using it.
Yeah.
And exactly what you said, it's that cheapest time of the year where you
Mm.
don't need to use your aircon in the car or at home as much, or you don't have to use the heater as much. It's kind of a good sleeping temperature and a nice daytime temperature. But like I say, it depends on if you're feeling a bit sick. I've had a cold the last week, and that
Ah.
definitely made me much softer. I wanted the heat pump on a lot more. And then the sun would come out, and you think, oh, am I getting sick because I'm all sweaty now? But it's literally 20 something degree afternoons and cold starts. It's
Yeah.
a lovely time of the year. And speaking of cold starts, we've got frosts on the way
Oh my
coming up
goodness.
this weekend, and particularly Monday of next week in the lower South Island. So we are not done yet with the winter side of spring just yet.
I have been noticing that it's snow down to 600 metres, but that's pretty mountainous generally. And we've got this spring vibe, whether it's either chucking it down with rain, or it's like, you know what, I think I'll take my jacket off because it's quite warm. And that's the way it's rolling. In the meantime, though, I notice behind you not the usual map of New Zealand, but this is where all the weather geeks are focusing their attention at the moment in the southern United States. Some pretty serious stuff, some pretty serious storms, Phil.
Yeah, Hurricane Milton is a very serious storm, and it's got a lot of similarities to Hurricane Katrina, formed in the same area over the Gulf of Mexico, reached Category 5, became one of the most powerful Atlantic storms on record
Yeah.
out at sea, and then just as it started to make landfall, dropped from Category 5 to Category 3,
Yeah.
exactly what Katrina did. Why was Katrina so deadly and devastating? But partially because New Orleans is built in a ridiculous place. It's at the end of the Mississippi River, surrounded by lakes, and it's below sea level.
Wow.
That's not a good thing when a storm surge comes in. But when it comes to the western side of Florida, this is also very low lying, mangrove kind of area,
Yeah.
estuaries and things like that. And they're talking about a 4 meter storm surge. So that is not just the water gradually going up,
Yeah. Yeah.
it is the sea coming in and not going back out again. And so salt water coming through your house with a current, anyone who stood on the beach and had a wave go through them knows what that feels like.
Yeah.
So there are going to be houses removed off the map. There will be entire communities removed off the map from this storm. Now, in some ways, Florida is a silly place to live because it is so low lying and they get
Hmm.
hurricanes. So some of these houses are built in stupid places and they're rich and they can rebuild them, not a problem. But for a lot of people, this is going to be a very long recovery. And it's not often that forecasters talk like that before a storm hits,
Yeah.
which shows you how big this actually is.
Now, calls for evacuations in a lot of that area, but people are people, and some people may say, "Hey, we survived other storms. How hard can it be?" Looks like it's going to be much tougher than anything Florida's seen for a while.
Yeah, the thing with mandatory evacuations, it's a little confusing to some people because they see on the map this giant storm covers all of Florida and they think everyone's going to get it.
Yeah.
But the worst part, it's only in the middle part of it. So
Yeah.
that portion may only be 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers across. So if the storm tracks, I don't know, a little bit further south, that might spare an entire city from having damage.
Yeah.
And people then go, oh, it wasn't as bad. It's that core part of the storm. It's like being hit by a several hour long tornado.
Mm.
And that's why, we just don't get storms like this in New Zealand. Even now as a Category 3, this storm is way more powerful than our Cyclone Gabrielle was when that was Category 3 when it came into New Zealand. It's a different scale over in America. It's a much bigger scale.
And of course, another storm, Helene. caused some devastation. Was it North Carolina? Some loss of life, some pretty epic scenes of destruction there.
Yeah, and again, it's like America, the storm came in a similar area to Helene that Milton's in now.
Yeah.
Helene came in and went straight over Georgia and straight up to North Carolina, kind of bunny hopped over the state of Georgia, although they did have bad flooding there. But North Carolina was hit particularly hard because they had flooding ahead of the storm. But America inland doesn't get a lot of rain. It doesn't get as much as we think, because we hear about snowstorms and hurricanes. You kind of think they always get it worse than us. But actually, inland places like the Appalachian Mountains and that, they don't get these rain events. So to get 600-700 millimeters of rain in a day, these houses, they live in trailer parks, these trailer homes that are just like a rectangle thing on the edge of a river that we in New Zealand would never put a house next to. So it's a little bit of that as well. It's not just the weather was bad, but also people live in bad places.
And hey, it puts some things in perspective. While some people may be going, oh gosh, frost's coming to New Zealand next week, certainly a huge weather event impacting the US, and all sorts of conspiracy theories about whether or not this has been influenced by the US elections. We won't get into those. Meanwhile, back at home, though, as we wrap up the school holidays, comparatively, it's much better than Florida. But what can we expect, Phil?
Yeah, there's not a lot going on in the New Zealand area. We've got a cold front coming in, another one this weekend. That's the one that drops the temperatures, especially on Sunday night, and Monday morning for the South Island. Mm-hmm. At the same time, at the other end of the country, in the North Island, we've got two lows. One is forming at the moment and will be with us for the next day or so before it drifts off past East Cape and Gisborne. And then over the weekend, that little southerly change, or not little, but it's a cold but not overly powerful southerly change, moves up the country, and that sparks another low, which will form around Sunday and then Monday over the top of the North Island. Neither of these are not storms, but they just produce more cloud, more showers, more wet weather, and probably a few more complaints to the WeatherWatch complaints department.
Exactly. I imagine that's a growing department. However, I mean, showers generally settled towards the weekend. Yeah, I mean, showers are annoying, but we're not looking at the torrential downpours that we saw last week, for example.
No, there's no real severe weather risks in here. I mean, maybe Fiordland gets a rain warning, might be a very low-level wind warning around Wellington, which is not much to Wellingtonians. So no, I don't really see much around that's in the severe way. But like I say, frosts, bit of snow on the mountains, so it's not necessarily t-shirt weather for everybody. And so if you're going tramping or camping, be aware that there could be some borderline weather events in the hills and the ranges, but not so much in the main centres. Not at this stage anyway, but being spring, nervous always forecasting even 72 hours out.
Exactly. And hey, if people wanted to check out up-to-date details of the weather, weatherwatch.co.nz. Also, I understand you've posted a recent video about the US storms as well. People can check out details of that.
Yeah, we've got a video on our website about it, and also on our X account, Twitter. We are doing many posts there about it, and we get to retweet things. You just mentioned before about the politics, retweeting there about, this storm was not geoengineered. This has not been man-made. And so, like, Joe Biden, literally, the president just had to do a speech about that. And that's, for me as a weather forecaster, it's comforting to hear that, because people just don't understand technology. Governments are trying to manipulate weather, but it's on a very, very, very small scale, like a ski field.
Exactly.
Not a storm.
And it got nothing to do with the mini moon either, which is another theory that I heard.
Hey, yes, there's another one in there. I hadn't thought of that.
Hey, Phil, thank you so much for the work you do. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Have a great weekend.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.